What's up, everybody? This is Vince Bracy. I am a junior anthropology major. My presentation is on black masculinity and how it's portrayed in the media. I chose this topic because even though I know we've heard about it all the time, I just feel so strongly about it. I feel like it hasn't been stressed enough that something needs to be done. A lot of people don't take into account the importance of the black man to succeed, and I feel like we're just slacking in so many areas that it becomes a vicious circle of, oh, I'm the man because of this, and you should do this, that makes you a man. And just generation after generation, it's not happening. People say they're becoming a man, but nothing is really happening to further society. So I wanted to show you guys some clips where people are discussing what I feel is how you really become a man, and I guess how we can take a step towards improving the future.
In our community, in the black community, masculinity is associated with how many women you have, how many kids you have, how many times you've been in and out of prison.
The whole construction of black masculinity as we know it is so mired in patriarchal thinking within a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that black men can't begin to liberate themselves without interrogating and questioning how sexism has shaped the nature of black masculinity.
We don't have the privileges that they have. We don't share the tremendous opportunities that are given to them at birth by virtue of white skin privilege.
We, unlike white males, had to earn our masculinity. We could not take it for granted, and oftentimes masculinity was denied us, and we were isolated, we were alienated, we couldn't be providers of our own families. We couldn't feel good about our accomplishments. We couldn't feel good about being men. And so I think that, masculinity, because of the difficulties of being able to attain a sense of masculinity, because of our past, it became the most important thing to us.
I guess some people might not understand why it's so important to be cool for a black man, but I know that when I was young, it was extremely important to be cool. To walk cool, to talk cool, to be perceived as cool. Nobody wanted to be perceived as corny. Nobody wanted to be perceived as being, nerdy, because that meant you were less than a man.
It's a defining mechanism for each other. It's a force that black boys have created to bring them to manhood.
Around my way, brothers got their respect, how many guns they had, how fast they could pull the trigger, how much drugs they sold, what kind of car they was driving, how many girls they was with. It was never ever an issue of your intellect.
I think black masculinity is defined through our various experiences. It just all depends on the circle that you're running with. If you have a group of people, for instance, some guys from the neighborhood, whoever is kind of a visual thing. If you view them as the hallmark or the benchmark for masculinity, that's gonna kind of navigate or dictate what you view masculinity or how you view being a man. And what's so interesting about that whole concept is if you take an individual, i.e. from, the projects or the hood, and you put them in another place, it'll be different for them. But I think through that process, they can adapt. For me, example, I didn't come from a upper middle class background, but I knew when I got to a different environment and I saw people that I could identify myself with, like SGA presidents and leaders of organizations on campus, that really shaped and redefined my experience. And through that, it was no longer about the, keeping it real, so to speak, or, I gotta wear my pants below my waist, or, I have to be disrespectful, I have to be aggressive, so to speak. It was about changing my attitude and changing how I view the world. And those individuals enlightened me on how to do that. And that was through a brotherhood and a bond. And to kind of wrap it all up, I think that masculinity is defined by your experience, depending on where you are. But the important part about it, it can change. It can be negative in one aspect, but then you can tie that in and it could come together to be something very positive.
There's something about the experience of black masculinity that's about improvisation, about making a way out of no way. When Norman Mailer writes his essay in 1957, The White Negro, all right, this is 1957. It ain't got nothing to do with Eminem. Norman Mailer writes an essay in his book, Advertisements for Myself, called The White Negro, and he makes this argument that for young, middle-class white men of the 1950s, what they see in black men, right, is the embodiment of danger and excitement, that the black man has to live on the edge all the time. And for them to go into these jazz clubs and wear their little goatees and eventually develop spoken word around this kind of stuff, that was the way that they could vicariously have the experience of black men. So I think black men on the one hand, you know, have always embodied this in the larger society, and in some ways have embraced it because it's the only space in which they've been allowed, right, to embrace, particularly around aspects of performativity. Right, so you talk about cats who are doing improvisation on microphones, if you're talking about cats who are doing improvisation on basketball courts, if you're talking about saxophone players, right, I mean, the very foundations of what makes jazz a great American art form of the 20th century, right, is this aspect of improvisation. I think that's very much a part of black masculinity that I think is obviously connected to a larger ethos, you know, within the African American community and the black community right there.
We have been tricked into believing that killing the next man to handle our problem is masculine or makes us down.
We're hurting each other, killing one another. Hurting one another.
But you know what? It's mostly black men doing it to black men, you know?
Yeah.
Our children.
In a society where getting high is more appealing than getting a higher education, it's hard to find a sense of motivation to achieve. We try to trace it to the root of the problem, and usually it's like a lack of male role models or negative cultural influence. But at the end of the day, you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. You got to make them want it so bad for themselves. So the young black males, you have millions of images and magazine covers of people like Barack Obama and Steve Harvey, Denzel Washington, Russell Simmons. All these people are there to show these young men that, yeah, you can still be cool and rich and famous, but you're going to have to handle your business to get to that point. And that business consists of graduating high school and college.
You could not look at him and say that being intelligent was a contradiction to being black and male.
There is a bit of 50 and a Barack in every black man.
50 Cent had no chance of winning in the realm of hip-hop.
Hip-hop, movies, all sorts of other things have been active in the process of making that image the dominant image of black men in the United States.
Barack equaled Harvard. Someone like 50 Cent equaled Hood. Hood equaled virility. Harvard equaled impotence. And it made me think about the way manhood had evolved in terms of blackness over a period of time and how dangerous it had become. Gangster rap had begun to shape the definition of black manhood to the degree that it made, certainly I think, middle-class men lose their place in manhood in the eyes of women. Not in a real sense, but in terms of the media image. Because everywhere you went, the image of manhood in every form of creative media came out of that 50 Cent mold. If it wasn't thugged out, then it wasn't manhood. And for too many of young boys, both here in the US and certainly in London, there aren't those male figures, so then all they have to define manhood is what comes out of the small screen or what comes out of a magazine or what comes out of a hip-hop video.